Our guest today, Andrew Jones, took the top job in Victorian racing in July. He comes from largely a cricket administration background, once won Sale of the Century, and more recently has worked in leadership roles in netball and Racing Victoria's media business. Andrew, welcome to the Press Club. Tell us firstly what that sort of background brings to racing and how you might enhance and grow racing.
Thanks, Tom, and thanks, everyone. It's a great privilege to be here. I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land, the Wurundjeri people. I hope I've said that correctly, and the traditional owners of Crown, the Williams family, who are obviously very important in racing. What do I bring to racing? A lot of ignorance. There's a lot I need to learn about how racing works and a lot of the detail that sits underneath it. But also what I bring is a perspective of how to grow sports. I think this is sport number 5 or 6 I've worked in as a executive or consultant. I'm a sports nuffy myself. I've been thinking constantly about the business of sport for probably 20 years. And I also bring the perspective of somebody who doesn't understand racing well, which is most people. And so one of racing's challenges is a challenge faced by all sports, which is it's run by people who love it and understand it at a deep level. And they forget what it's like when you're not really into it. So how do you build a bridge for people to get into your sport from being indifferent to interested to, I won't say addicted, but where it becomes part of their life and how they entertain themselves.
So this is the Melbourne Press Club with a heavy emphasis on Melbourne. As a Sydney-sider, what's your initial impressions of the racing industry and sporting industry in this state?
Oh, it's fantastic. I'm absolutely loving being in Melbourne. I've done a lot of work here over the years, but always on a commuting basis. This is the first time I've lived here. I'm thoroughly enjoying it. I was desperately afraid of being cold, and I haven't been cold. I was afraid of being wet. I'm telling you, it is 3 times wetter in Sydney at least. And it's a great place to be working in sport. It's very, very different. I mean, Victorians know this, but Victorians and Melburnians really, really identify with sport at a deep level, and they have a circadian rhythm which doesn't exist in Sydney, which is, AFL March to last Saturday, racing now for a couple of months, Boxing Day Test, Australian Open, Formula 1 Grand Prix, AFL starts again, repeat, and you go from being 14 to 94 without noticing, because you're just going through that cycle throughout your life and doing it with your parents and then your mates and then your own kids, and then it's 3 generations, and it's just a wonderful place to be running a sport. Sydney's very different. Sydney's not one place. Sydney is an amalgam of very, very small neighbourhoods. Most people in Sydney haven't been to most places in Sydney. And it's a very, very granular place. They can't agree on what football code to watch. They can't agree on what sports they're into. Racing is way, way down in the mix in Sydney compared to Melbourne. So it's an absolute treat to be here and working in this sport in this town.
So we're coming into the peak time of the year for Victoria racing. What fresh concepts can people expect to see this year, and who in your mind are racing's main competitors for the critical share of eyeballs and wagering? Let's
take the second question first. Who are the competitors for racing? People would say that Racing New South Wales is a competitor of Racing Victoria and vice versa. I don't see it that way particularly. We're all trying to grow racing, and the more eyeballs we have on the sport, the better. Our real competitors are every other form of sport and entertainment. So we need to have something that excites people and entertains them at a time and at a place and a format that they want to watch. I think what we do really well is own Saturday afternoon. Footy and to some extent cricket have shifted out of the Saturday afternoon time slot over the years, and we've doubled down on it with our deal with Seven, with Racing.com, with Sky, with streaming. But it's also about making sure it's accessible at all the other times that fans want to watch. In terms of innovation, that's an ongoing discussion between us and the race clubs, and I want to acknowledge Matt Welsh, who's starting as our new head of racing on Monday. Matt's got a fantastic background across media, wagering and racing, and so one of his key briefs is to work with the clubs and stakeholders to innovate our race program. And what I mean by that goes back to the first concept, which is you've got to explain racing to people who don't understand it. Racing nuffies understand the progression through the weeks of the Spring Carnival leading into the Spring Majors. They get all that. Normal people do not understand this stuff. So if I asked you what's the biggest race in Australia, you'd say presumably the Melbourne Cup. Who would say the Melbourne Cup? Peter was here, he might say the Everest, but let's go with Melbourne Cup for now. And I've asked the second question, how do you get into it? How many of you could tell me how you get into the Melbourne Cup specifically? Come on, put up your hands. Right, so that's like 5% of people in this room, which is a racing audience, know how you get into the Melbourne Cup. If I asked you what's the biggest AFL game of the year, Saturday's game accepted, everyone knows it's the grand final, right? And everyone knows how you get into it. Whereas we've got a grand final and no one knows how you qualify for it. That's very unusual. But people in racing understand it, so it doesn't seem strange to them. It seems very strange to me.
So you touched on New South Wales. At the same time as we're all heading to Caulfield or Moonee Valley or Flemington, the Racing New South Wales CEO, Peter V'landys, is spending millions and millions in promotion to target the best horses, the best jockeys and the crowds to Sydney racing. Is this cannibalising the sport, or is it rising tide floats all boats?
I'm in the rising tide category. It's very, very hard to get Sydney people out of the house and going to an event. I often say to people, if you told most people from Sydney they were playing the grand final in their chosen football code at their next door neighbour's house in 10 minutes, they'd be non-committal because they'd be worried about the parking or the crowd or the price of the food or whatever. So anything that gets more people in Sydney and New South Wales engaged in racing is fantastic. Josh Blanksby is here, CEO of the Melbourne Racing Club. An hour after the Everest will be the Caulfield Cup, which is one of our 3 spring majors. So the bigger the audience for the Everest, the bigger the audience for the Caulfield Cup and vice versa. And, the better we all do as a sport.
It has been described in terms of matching prize money as an arms race. Where does it stop? And, is there any chance we'll have a truly national racing calendar like football or cricket or other sports like that?
Okay, probably 3 elements to that question. Let's talk about prize money dynamics. Happiest people in the world at the moment, which really surprised me, but the happiest people in the world at the moment in racing are trainers, because they see the prize money battle, so to speak, as money for jam. There's more money on offer in New South Wales and Victoria, and they don't have to pick a side. They're just playing Pac-Man. So trainers are just playing Pac-Man with your horse, just trying to gobble up as many of the little cubes, and then find the big ones where they get to eat all the other ghosts. That's all they're doing. So if there's more money on offer in Sydney, they'll go to Sydney. If there's more money on offer in Melbourne, they'll go to Melbourne, and that applies across regional New South Wales, country New South Wales. So what ends up happening, if you have big money for the same types of races in both cities at the same time, which we sort of do with some of our sprints, the field's just split. So, you're better off winning the Manikato than coming probably anywhere below about 3rd or 4th in the Everest. And so you go, well, okay, if I don't think I can beat Nature Strip, then I'll stay in Melbourne. Whereas if I think I can win the Everest, I'll go to the Everest. So they're just doing an expected value calculation, and we're not going to be in a situation where either of us has empty fields. The trainers will work out where the best place to place their horses is. So that part of it's really overstated, I think. In terms of where does prize money escalation end, it ends when revenue stops growing. So prize money is not really about tit for tat between the states. It's really about how we, as a PRA, a Principal Racing Authority, distribute money to the stakeholders of the industry. So this is going to be difficult because I'm holding a microphone, but I describe how we use money with my 7-finger strategy, and the fingers are the race clubs, which we fund directly, the owners, trainers and jockeys, whom we fund through prize money, Racing Victoria's operating expenses, capital investment on behalf of the industry, and then a rainy day fund, which we put on our balance sheet and then use when needed, which we used during COVID quite extensively. And they're the 7 places that money goes. When most of the money comes in through Racing Victoria and it goes out into those 7 ways. And prize money is how we pay owners, trainers and jockeys. So the more money we've got, the more money we pay to them through prize money, and the percentages we allocate to the 7 fingers are pretty steady over time. So it'll stop when revenue stops growing.
Can I change tack for a minute? And Racing Victoria and the industry here in the state have put a lot of focus, resources and energy into animal welfare over the last couple of years after we had that very horrific 2020 Melbourne Cup where a couple of horses passed away. How critical is this issue, and do you think it's deterring younger audiences from being involved in the sport?
Yes, there are a lot of misperceptions about racing associated with how horses are treated and the risks to horses, and we're very aware that we have to address those concerns genuinely to ensure that the next generation of young people can enjoy racing as much as we do. And whether that's as a punter or as just as a spring social, turning up, frocking up and having a good time at Flemington or Caulfield or Moonee Valley, we want people to be able to go and do that guilt-free. You know, let's face it, we're a fun business. We're a fun and social business. It's about getting a good kit on, having a drink, having a punt, maybe meeting someone you like, and we want people to be able to do that without worrying that the horses are mistreated. As it happens, this industry is badly misunderstood by people who take no time to do any research. But if you think about it logically, if you spend somewhere between $20,000 and $1 million on a racehorse, what do you do next? Do you stop feeding it, or do you look after it within an inch of its life, give it massages, the best food available, the best training, the best quarters, the best stabling, breaks every time you run 4 times, you get a break for 3 or 4 months. Racehorses are to 99% accuracy treated extremely well, but we need to get that message out there.
Okay. We're in Victoria and also in New South Wales, we're witnessing a growth in female jockey and training ranks. Is there a conscious effort to make what has traditionally been a male-dominated sport more accessible to both young men and women?
There has been a conscious effort. I think a couple of things have happened. Australia's grown up. The children of 1970s women's libbers like me have sort of grown up in an era where you think men and women are equal for very good reason, and so you don't find it strange that men and women both ride horses. There's been specific responses to that, e.g. having proper change rooms for female jockeys at every race course, all that sort of stuff. And the other one's Michelle Payne. When it boils down to it, Michelle Payne has probably been the most valuable person in racing in the last 20 years because she completely changed the perception of who rides a racehorse. And old school racing people thought women weren't strong enough to control a horse, which is of course complete nonsense. And if you think about it logically, if you're looking for people who weigh between 50 and 58 kilos, where would you look first? Do you look in the men's section or the women's section? So the genie's out of the bottle now. And my view is the percentage of male-female split of jockeys will almost completely reverse in the next 10 years. I reckon in 20 years' time, jockeys will be 80 or 90% female to male. But the beauty of racing is it's all on merit. So if you're good enough, you get the rides, male or female, and you can make the weight, you get the rides. And you look at somebody like Jamie Carr, who's, if not the best, certainly in the top handful of jockeys in Victoria. She's got a pick of horses pretty much every weekend. And
like Michelle, she's sort of transcended racing into other parts of the media. And how critical is that you have the heroes in your sport that aren't just known to the punters?
Oh, 100%. I mean, again, for insiders, they understand every horse, every jockey, every trainer. But for the average person on the street, they know the superstars, and that's all they know, which is why Michelle Payne's so valuable. Elise Perry performed the same function in cricket. She was worth more than every other cricketer, male or female, put together because she changed the perception of cricket. And Jamie's rapidly heading to that into that category. So hopefully she has a very, very good spring.
I hope so too, with my money. A change tack again, problem gambling is an issue that never seems far from the news cycle for a lot of people in this room. What's Racing Victoria's responsibility to ensure that wagering is appropriately governed and promoted?
Good question. A few things to say. Firstly, wagering is a legitimate form of entertainment for millions of Australians. People do it because they enjoy it. And yes, they spend money on it, but they spend money on all sorts of other things. Eating out at places like this, buying cars, having boats, going on holidays, Netflix subscriptions, you name it. Any other form of entertainment costs money, or most of them do. Going to gyms. So it's a form of entertainment, and so it's not for some people, and that's fine. But our view is live and let live. Diversity in everything, including your taste and how you like to be entertained. And the vast majority of punters are social punters. Now there are edge cases of addiction and problem gambling, as there are in just about anything else, and they're very, very actively managed by the WSPs and with our assistance, and they're subject to more and more regulation from the state. So, the legislative approach to wagering and gambling has been to regulate and tax, and I think that's the right approach because, vast majority of people, it's just something they do on weekends and a form of entertainment they choose to enjoy.
Okay. Several sports, including your one, cricket, are moving to quicker paced and shorter formats of the game, and you were at the forefront of, in case the audience doesn't know, Andrew was at the forefront of the Big Bash League when it formed here. Can we expect 6-hour race meetings shortened in the future, or see less time between races to appeal to that quicker, faster mentality?
Shorter race meetings in certain time slots for sure. Maybe not Saturdays because they're big wagering days for us. And what tends to happen is customers don't go to every race, or they don't stay for the whole card, and that's fine, or they don't watch the whole card. But we had a meeting at Pakenham last Thursday to honour Her late Majesty the Queen. She would have wanted an extra race meeting, so we put one on. And that was a 2.5-hour meeting. 7 race card, it might have been 3.5. It was 7 race card, and it was done by 8 o'clock. And it was a good meeting, nice and quick, half an hour between races. You've got constraints on the weekends when there are lots of races with the national clock. You've got to fit in a whole lot of jurisdictions that are trying to race at the same time, so they're sort of 3 minutes apart over a typically 35 to 40 minute clock, but other times of the week for sure.
Okay. There's been, on that sort of theme, there's been some commentary, largely in the racing industry and media, but a little bit wider, that we simply have too much racing and too few trained staff available. I think, 2 back-to-back Saturday and Sunday metropolitan meetings have probably fueled that discussion. So what's your view? Do we have too much of a good thing, or are the participants' welfare being put at risk?
I don't think we have too much racing. Nobody's campaigning for a pay cut, at least if they are, they haven't got to me yet. And if you have less racing, you have less money to distribute to the industry. So I don't think we'll see less racing. I think we have to give the big racing more context and explain it better to the casual fan, as I mentioned. But bear in mind that you never have to race. So racing is a very different model to most sports, where there are clubs and then the players are all contracted to the club, and there's a salary cap that takes a percentage of revenue and everyone's paid out of that. Racing is run by independent business people. So trainers are independent businesses, jockeys are independent contractors. They never have to race. They don't have to race on Sundays, they don't have to race on Saturdays, they don't have to race on Thursday nights. But they do, because that's when the big money's on. And the big money's on because that's when people are watching the races. And so, people who say there's too much racing have to understand that they never have an obligation to go to a race meeting and ride or train or do anything else. And many don't. Many won't go to certain races, or they'll take days of the week off. And that creates opportunity for other owners, trainers and jockeys.
They might say, you're scheduling the races that they have to fit their horses in with. So we're driving to Swan Hill, to Melbourne, to Pakenham. We've got no staff. Is that a genuine issue, or they just need to remodel their business?
The staff shortage, I think, is a separate issue to the race volume issue, and our racing department works really closely with stakeholders on race scheduling to make sure we have races in the right part of the state, in the right volume, at the right levels. Labour shortages, and when we had a race-free week last week, by the way, people complained that we'd had a race-free week because it's like, well, we've got to work the horses every day, we might as well be racing them for money. So the labour shortage is a combination of things. It's immigration's basically been shut for a couple of years, and we've traditionally relied on a lot of migrant workers for stable jobs. Secondly, we need to attract more people into the industry, and we're doing a lot of things to try and educate more people on working in stables and working with horses and being track riders and so forth. And thirdly, as an industry, and again this comes down to probably trainers as individual business people, they've got to look at their pay and conditions. And some people like getting up at 3:30 in the morning. Who likes getting up at 3:30 in the morning? Show of hands. That's a typical start time for a stable employee. And so people go, why do we have staff shortages? And I say, look, let's send this one down to Forensic. Hey, Forensic, what do you think? They have to start at 3:30 in the morning. Now, that doesn't sound like much fun to a lot of 18-year-olds. So working hours at certain times a year is something we have to look at as well.
Okay. You mentioned people's introduction into racing, and we're blessed here in Victoria to have some excellent talent in the racing media. But tell the audience here a little bit about the voice of racing, Matt Hill, who many people described to me recently as the best commentator of sport in Australia, not just racing.
I concur. I think it's between him and Bruce, probably. He's fantastic, Matt. He does two or three things really well. He is extremely accurate. He identifies the horses. This sounds obvious, but it's really important. He identifies the horses really well in the run, and particularly at the finish. He has a point of view on who's won and who hasn't won. He's got a magnificent, melodious voice, very different to mine, and especially with a cold. And he understands the shape of a race. So he understands a race has a beginning, a middle and an end, and that it needs to build to a climax. And he just does that absolutely brilliantly, and he makes it sound so easy. And he's absolutely brilliant. So we've taken steps to make sure he's locked into us for the foreseeable future.
So it'd be odd for a lot of people in this room and a lot of people who follow sport that a commentator in one sport then is allowed to go and call the AFL or the Olympics or the Commonwealth Games. Well, given you or Racing.com are his primary employer, tell us the thought behind allowing him to do that.
Well, you've got to make sure your people are happy. You've got to make sure they're stimulated. You've got to make sure they're growing. And Matt was offered some opportunities to be involved in the Olympics in Tokyo. The Olympics were in Tokyo. I think Matt might have been in Melbourne. But we weren't going to say no to that. And likewise, calling AFL when it doesn't clash with racing is fine by us as well. Plus, we have a very collaborative relationship with Channel 7. They're an extremely important partner for us. So we were happy to give Matt those opportunities. He's looked after us, so we look after him.
Okay, one more question from me, and then we'll open it up to the floor. There are 4 main racetracks operating in metropolitan Melbourne and several others in outlying suburbs like Pakenham, Cranbourne, Mornington, Werribee. Mm-hmm. Is that too much infrastructure, and can we expect some consolidation?
Good question. Little curly one to finish. We've got to manage our infrastructure as a network. So I see Greater Melbourne as a network, and as you've named most of them, but there's the Northwest Land, which we're going to settle on in 20 minutes, which is about the size of 3 Flemingtons. There's
just to describe the audience where and what that use might be.
It's in the northwest. I haven't been there, so I don't know exactly. It's big. It's a farm at the moment. And it could be anything. It could be racetracks, training centres, quarantine centres, workforce training centres, or a combination of all of the above. So we've got that parcel, we've got Moonee Valley, we've got Flemington, we've got Werribee, as you mentioned, we've got Caulfield, we've got Sandown. Caulfield with 2 tracks now, or about to have 2 tracks. Sandown with 2 tracks. We've got Pakenham, Cranbourne, Mornington. So we just need to match the racing infrastructure, the training stables, and then the fan infrastructure, grandstands and so forth, which are the really expensive part of race courses, to the amount of racing that we need to put on in and around Melbourne, and the size of the crowds that we expect for those races. So, there are various possibilities that may play out, but whatever we do, it'll be in consultation with the clubs and stakeholders, and the network will be better. It'll either be the same as it is now or better. We're not going to improve it worse.
Okay, I'd like to open it up to the floor for questions for Andrew. Could I ask those people who are asking questions to raise their hand? There's 2 roving mics here, and if you wouldn't mind just identifying yourself and your organisation before you ask your question. So there's one from Justin Quill.
Thanks. Andrew, I'm originally from Warrnambool, probably the greatest town in Australia, if not the world. We of course run the May Racing Carnival, which is without question the greatest regional racing carnival in Australia. Crucial to Warrnambool and its economic success and tourism, etc., is that May Racing Carnival. Mm-hmm. But crucial to the May Racing Carnival is jumps racing, not just the Grand Annual, but the other jumps races that are on that week. Victoria is now the only state that has jumps racing. What's your view or plans for the long-term sustainability, if you think it is sustainable, for jumps racing in Victoria? The Warrnambool people are listening with bated breath.
No, good question, Justin. Excuse me. The Racing Victoria position is very clear. We'll continue jumps racing as long as we can do it safely and economically. And those with concerns about jumps racing, I think, had a case 10 years ago. There's always inherent risk in races to the participants, but jumps racing was genuinely dangerous. It's become much, much safer now thanks to the efforts of the jumps racing community, bringing in much, much safer hurdles and allowing riders to pull out of races if the horses are spent and not going to get over the jumps, and you're not supposed to pull up horses in flat racing. The stewards don't like that very much. So the injury rate and the fatality rate for horses has come right down in the last 10 years. It's sort of in or around maybe 1%. It's don't quote me on that figure, but it's low, and we'd like to get it lower. So that's really there's an element of inherent risk as there is in racing cars, for example. For as long as we're comfortable with the risk level and the economics, we'll continue to do it.
Okay. Brad?
Thanks.
Hey, Brad, how are you?
I'm well.
Shouldn't you be at the races?
I'm here because Tom told me to be.
Very sensible.
I must ask you about your comments about independent trainers, jockeys, etc. Independent. Given that trainers are unlike any other sports people in the world in terms of they've got to buy their own team. Oh, actually, they've got to go into heavy debt to buy their own team and get them out on the park, and then for you to say they don't have to race. Is it not something that needs a bit of work, considering that to get the trainers on the park, the trainers have got to carry massive debt, and some do constantly through the way the purchase system is.
Oh yeah, well, when I say they don't have to race, they obviously do have to race, but they don't have to race at every race meet in every time slot. So if, for example, there's a Sunday race meet that they don't want to attend, they don't have to, and they don't have to send horses to it. So, and they, the reality is they race at some meetings, but not all of them. So what I'm saying is it's their choice where they place their horses and when. So our job is really, as Racing Victoria, is to optimise the schedule to maximise industry revenue, so we can maximise distributions to participants, of whom trainers are obviously a vital group.
Isn't it more interdependent, because apprentices don't have a choice where they go, they have to go, and then so many jockeys like we see all the way through the years of jockeys going to Donald and all these far-flung places to find potential stars, and they've got to go to follow them.
Well, yeah, but again, they're making career choices about where their opportunity is, and that's like anybody in any business. They're young jockeys making their way will travel further for rides. They want to build their experience, build their credibility, build their book of winners, and get opportunities. But for people who are out of their apprenticeship, again, they don't have to race at Donald. They don't have to race at Caulfield. They can race when their opportunity meets their availability.
Sorry, just one last one. On the apprentices, we noticed that you talk about female participation, which has been fantastic for the sport. What can we do to get First Nations kids or kids from other backgrounds? Because at the apprentice school is predominantly, and that's the way it's been for so long, predominantly a white Anglo sort of makeup of the intakes. What can we do to get multicultural kids into apprenticeships?
Well, there are 12 apprenticeships per year in Victoria, so almost everybody is not an apprentice. There's only 12 people in Victoria who are apprentice, so that's probably not where I'd start. I'd look at how do we get people from all backgrounds into the industry, and there's a very simple process, which is to say, put your hand up, I want to work in racing, and we'll take you tomorrow and put you through a stable start program, and you'll literally be off to the races, within a matter of weeks.
Whilst people are considering putting up their hands, I'll have one last go. Andrew, if we fast forward 5 years, what do you think is going to be different about Victorian racing, and how and when, and we watch it and wager on it?
That's a good question. I think a lot of the things will be similar. The great races will still be there. The Spring Carnival will still be there, bigger and better, Autumn Carnival, etc. What I would like to see from a fan point of view is much more clearly defined seasons and much more clearly defined progressions. So if you're a casual fan, you understand what you're watching. You understand that I'm watching this new series in New South Wales is a great example. This Sportsbet Sprint Series, great format. It's a 6-race series, and you get points per race. Last race is worth double, and at the end of that, somebody gets a big check. So that concept of having really clear series for the different types of races, fillies, colts, mares, etc., open class, all that sort of stuff. There's so many variations in racing. Just explain what's going on. Explain what's round one, what's the playoffs, and what's the grand final, and do that through the year. So that's what I would like to see.
Okay. Other questions from the floor? Hand up, or thank you.
Thank you, Andrew. Great to see you at Sandown on Sunday. Matt Kane from Melbourne Racing Club. Just a quick one on, I guess, the contributors to the industry from a funding perspective, particularly the equine welfare. You've now got a fee on owners' prize money to contribute to equine welfare, which I think is appropriate. The wagering operators contribute their contribution through the product fees for utilising the IP of the racing industry. I guess breeders, stud farms, with prize money going up, you're seeing huge increases in stallion service fees. The big conglomerate stud farms, many of which are overseas owned, I guess are cannibalising the market with huge premiums on those stallion fees. Are those stud farms and other breeders appropriately contributing to the industry fairly, and should we be considering an alternative funding model from them?
That's a good question. That is a good question. I'd have to take it on notice, because I actually don't know the answer to that question. I don't know the answer to that question. I'd have to think it through. But it's as the money goes up, as the prize money goes up, horses that can win the prize money and produce horses that win the prize money go up in value, and so the people who produce those horses charge more. So it's the eternal question: who makes all the money in racing? I think the breeders, the stud owners. So, for the uninitiated, a breeder is somebody who owns a mare, and a stud farm is where you've got a stallion, and often the stud farms have mares as well. But if you're a breeder, you own the mare, so you pay the money to the stud for the stallion service fee. I think the studs do pretty well as well, but they're also paying big money for horses. So we've got the Caulfield Guineas coming up Saturday week. That's what's known in the trade as a stallion making race. So if your colt wins that, it goes, first prize is whatever it is, probably $600,000, but the horse becomes worth $10 million because it becomes a stallion by virtue of winning that race. So inevitably, as prize money goes up, horse values will go up, which means studs will charge more. So whether you can tax that in a different way, I don't know. Need to think about it. Good question.
Okay. Unless there's any more questions, we might wind up there. Andrew Jones has got a very busy next couple of months. He's just got his feet under the table, and I'm sure you'll join me in wishing him all the best for the spring and the years again. Thank you, Andrew.
Thanks, everybody. Thank you.